Railway Conversations with Doc Frank.
Hello and welcome to Railway Conversations with me, Doc Frank. This podcast is there to present you authentic, unrehearsed discussions with interesting guests about railway topics that matter. Thank you for listening. My guest today is Teeshal Bal from Melbourne in Australia, originally from Malaysia, just to add to my list of guests with an international flavor. Teeshal has not just a strong career in railway, she's also a serial entrepreneur, almost as a hobby. She has founded 3 companies so far in topics as wide-ranging as mail distribution, real estate makeovers, and leadership training. I hope you will find this conversation highly entertaining, very inspirational, to show that it is possible to have a career outside a railway career or in addition to a railway career. Please enjoy. Hi, it's Doc Frank again, real quick before you head off. If you are a fan of communications-based train control or short CBTC, there's an event coming up in September that you absolutely don't want to miss. It's the first virtual global CBTC conference. It's called CBTC World Summit 2023, and it's happening on the 20th and the 21st of September. There will be 3 sessions of about 6 hours duration each for 3 different global regions, one for Asia Pacific, one's for North and South America, and one's for Europe and the Middle East. So wherever you are in the world, one of those sessions will be during the daytime in your time zone, and you can watch it live for the full 6 hours with 6 presentations. The kicker about this is that all other presentations, including the ones from your own session, will be available for replay via recordings. So that means that if the other session should be in the middle of your night, you can still watch it on demand at a time that's more convenient for you and doesn't interfere with your good night's sleep. The conference is available for registration right now at my training portal under docfranktraining.podia.com/summit23. I repeat that, docfranktraining.podia.com/summit23. I'm putting a lot of effort into this conference. It will be an absolute blockbuster event, and I very much hope to see you there. Until then, keep it simple and bye for now. Teeshal, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me on, Doc.
You're very, very welcome. You have been recommended by one of the previous podcast guests of mine, by Lisa Hogbin. And I had a look at your LinkedIn profile, which is my standard way of doing research on my guest. And I must admit, I was just blown away looking through your profile. There's so much stuff I want to talk to you about. Let's start with the fact that you seem to have at least 2 lives, and you kind of moving back and forth between those 2 things. One is you've got an established job in the railway industry. So you're currently working for Metro Trains Melbourne. Previously, you were in Perth working for Calibre, which is a major railway consultancy here in Perth. But on the side, or the other life, if you will, in your other life, you seem to be a serial entrepreneur. So I saw at least 3 companies from your LinkedIn profile, which you have founded over the years. Maybe you don't do them anymore. You're just doing the last one. So tell me a bit about your entrepreneurship and the companies you created and how that fits together with your profession in the railway industry.
How much time have we got, Doc, to cover this topic?
Well, you just start and then we see how we do.
Well, it's really interesting. I think coming from a Southeast Asian background, my parents used to say to me, study hard, get a good job, and keep climbing the corporate ladder, and life's going to be so good for you. That was the mantra that was drilled into my head. And it's really quite funny. So I finished my education. I started my engineering education in Malaysia and finished it in Perth, in Western Australia. And my first job as a graduate was within the railway industry. And so I worked for the Public Transport Authority, building building railway from Perth to Mandurah in the middle of the freeway. So as part of that project, I started to speak to a lot of engineers within the rail industry, and this may not surprise you, but I guess as a young early 20s into the industry, majority of people that I was dealing with, forget the fact that they weren't any females, majority were in their 50s. So I almost felt like there was a gap between where I was, and then there was a 20-year gap before I actually started to deal with the people within the industry. And part of the conversations with them was rather interesting. Instead of, as a grad coming into the industry, eager to roll my sleeves up and learn and as much as I can. But here I have a lot of engineering professionals talking about their retirement. And I went, oh, this is really interesting. This is me coming out of uni, eager to start work, and they're people talking about retiring. And I'm actually quite grateful for some of those conversations because it made me think about, actually, Teeshal, is this what you're planning to do for the rest of your life? Are you planning to work, 40, 45 hours, week in, week out for the next 40, 50 years of your life? And I think I went through a moment thinking, actually, I don't know if this is all I want to do. I don't know if railway is where I see myself spending all of my time. And I guess that was the start of exploring what could be possible outside of engineering or outside of railway.
Mm.
So that was really the start of it. So I was really excited to start my career within railway. As a project engineer, I did not like design, didn't like being in front of the computer, but I loved the construction aspect and seeing things being built. So started off as a site engineer into a project engineer. I worked in heavy haul rail as well in the Pilbara and loved that experience. But when there was a little bit of a break, I got into business. And very, very different business, nothing to do with engineering.
I was gonna say my next question that would come up is, how did you pick your businesses? Because it's so diverse. It started off with a mail servicing business, then there was a real estate makeover business, and then your latest one is all about leadership, probably leadership training or something like that. So how do you get your ideas, and where is this very wide and diverse interest coming from?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I didn't come from a family of business people. I did not actually have any associations or people around me who was in business, but I knew that I wanted to do more outside of my 9 to 5, more so for the experience sake. I wanted to be able to almost have this thinking when, if I was to have great grandchildren, I want to share with them all the different stories. And how can I only have stories doing the one thing in my life? I guess that was the thought process. So I guess to kick off the entrepreneurship journey, because I didn't have people around me who could give me advice, I joined an organization called XL that stood for Extraordinary Leaders. I paid for a membership to be part of this community, and it was entrepreneurs all around. And what was really interesting is that in the leadership sort of sense, and you might have come across different personality tests like Myers-Briggs or DISC or any type of personality type tools, this particular group did a wealth profile test. So they actually worked out your strength, your weaknesses, the way you thought, and put you into quadrants to work out how to create wealth. And it was very interesting. So it was thinking how the Richard Bransons of the world thought, or the Jack Welch, or the Oprah Winfreys of the world, right? So you've got really different type of profiles as to how they've created wealth. And it was 8 different personality types, put them into a group to actually assess business ideas. And that was the start of it. So these 8 different people that were in my particular group, one guy was the creator, so the person that actually comes up with the ideas. And his idea was to establish a postal distribution network that could one day rival Australia Post. That was the idea. So this group of 8, we actually purchased the master license to start up that franchise in Western Australia. So, and I was very young at that point in time, mid 20s, and work sort of finished up within the railway and contract came to an end. And then I thought, okay, this seems like a great opportunity. So I kind of launched into business and took on the operations role and learned everything from scratch because, like I said, nothing to do with railway engineering. And then within a short 3 years, we grew our business to 250 franchises within Western Australia. So we were extremely profitable. And what it was we actually franchised zones whereby a postal agent or would buy a zone of 5,000 letterbox distribution, and they would be responsible for the distribution within that area. And we guaranteed the distribution of junk mail effectively, which was a $6 billion industry in itself, by wearing GPS trackers, and no one else was doing it at the time. And they were wearing uniforms and they had a vehicle. But unfortunately, that whole story went a little bit south after about 3 years because we had our licensor that was based in New South Wales. We had a trust account. I was a director at the time, and our funds got mismanaged. So one day I look at my bank account and there was nothing there. None of our postal agents got paid. And as a director, you can't be seen trading insolvent. So we had to close the doors.
Mm. Mm. Mm.
So it was an experience that forced me to grow up very, very quickly and gave me a taste of what business can be or what it can't be.
Yeah, yeah. And I think what it does more than anything is it builds resourcefulness. It basically shows you how to deal with problems and how to solve problems, which again will be very helpful generally in life and also then in the next stage of your railway career if you were going back to railways, which actually you ended up doing. Yeah. So how did real estate come about?
Yeah, that's a really good question again. I think it just came from reading books, right? So when I was reading a lot of different books and I thought, okay, if I wanted to get ahead in life, what should I do? And then most people seem to get into property and I thought, okay, I would do that. But I did the standard thing that most people would do, buy a house and then wait for another couple of years. The value of property goes up, use the equity, buy the next one, and, the normal thing. But then I came across a really interesting lady who was based in New South Wales, and she was a barrister who was also an entrepreneur. And she was teaching people how to buy distressed properties. So properties that were going through bank auctions. And I thought, oh, this is really interesting. So I did a course with her, and it's quite funny. My little one was only 6 weeks old at that point in time. So I parked her with my mom and flew across to New South Wales and did this course over a weekend. And at the end of it, signed up to her program where she would actually mentor me to find these deals or find a way to actually establish or create a property portfolio using distressed properties or buying distressed properties. And I learned that very, very quickly from her. I remember one of the conversations I had with her. I said, so, because distressed properties typically are quite run down. Before the bank sort of take over, typically the owner has got no interest in their property, so they don't really upkeep it really well. So I asked her, I said, how fast does your students flip the property? And they said, oh, my fastest student does it in 4 weeks. And I went, okay, so if you've got a student that does it in 4 weeks, I can do it in 4 weeks too. So we went, and Perth didn't really have a lot of auctions. That's just not how people generally buy property in Western Australia. But the bank auctions, bank auctions had to happen in order for distressed properties to be sold. And I remember after getting the first property, I was ready to actually renovate the property, but I had zero experience in renovation. I've never done it before. But my engineering brain was thinking, okay, here's the Gantt chart. Let's work out all the different tradespeople that I need, and let's just project manage the whole thing. And at one point, I think I had 6 different tradespeople in the house, thinking they could all just work and do their own thing.
Mm-hmm.
And much to my surprise, that one day I came in there, coffee in hand, getting really excited. I just thought if I start the morning by making people have free coffee, the mood is up and people would work a little bit quicker. But my painter was extremely disappointed with me. He threw his brushes down and he said, Teeshal, I cannot work in this space. And I'm like, what's wrong? Why are you so upset? And he says, you've got the chippy going off here, you've got the sparky going off here, and I just can't work. And I looked at him and went, what's a chippy and what's a sparky? Right? So that was me trying to get exposure into just language that Australians tend to use as well within the industry. But the good news is we did finish the entire renovation and put it back on the market within 4 weeks and 1 day, I think it was. So it was a good result in the end. But that was the start of that. It's learning from somebody who's actually had experience, and then from then on we started to renovate more properties, buy, renovate, and sell. And I think I did about 6 or 8 properties within a year. And I had 2 little kids at that point in time. And then people would say to me, "You're really, really fast. Within 4 weeks, you've got properties, you buy and it's on the market again. Maybe you should start up your own renovation company." And I thought, what a brilliant idea. Yeah. And that's how I started up my own renovation business.
Right. And you could probably do training on this as well, yeah? How to flip a property in 4 weeks. No, seriously. I mean, that the opportunities are endless. Once you've got a skill that's in demand, and where others say, "Well, how do you do that?" Then that's normally an ideal proposition, either to start teaching about it or to, create a company and basically scale up. Yeah. So, yeah. Okay.
I think I learned about what not to do when you're starting up your business, because we went through a whole phase of 12 months where I was just finding my feet as to how do I grow my renovation business. And I was having booths at the Better Homes and Gardens, like trying to find, because I didn't have any leads, right? Like where do you find customers? And you haven't been established within the industry as well for people to want to use your service.
Yeah.
But it was trial and error, but we got to a point from doing nothing. And then by the end of that 1 year, we started to actually do about 40 to 60 properties of renovating 40 to 60 properties, wow. Having my own supervisor, like trades teams and stuff like that. So it was pretty successful towards the end, but we went through a bit of a rough, steep learning curve, one would say.
Yeah. Everybody does. But again, the life lessons from something like this are so diverse, so many, and so extremely valuable for everything that comes later in life. That's one thing that I love about entrepreneurship. You really have to deal, especially when you start out on your own, you have to deal with the whole raft of people, of topics, yeah, from payroll, and then somebody invents single touch payroll, and then you need a new software, and then you need to deal with accountants, and you need to do your own expenses, and you need to find customers, of course, you need to make offers, you need to win business. So you are in sales, you are in marketing, you are in operations, you are in bloody everything. Yeah, it's
everything.
Yeah. So this company, you did you move out of there because you're doing something different now again, aren't you?
Yes. So I was running the renovation company for over three years, and then from there we got into property development and stuff as well. So my partner is also in railways, and in 2016, Western Australia took a really big hit where mining was concerned, and he was in mining as well, and he lost his job. And so with the renovation business kept us afloat for a period of time, and then things were booming in Victoria. He got a job over here, and I think at that point in time he said, are you ready for a change? And that's how we kind of moved the whole family across. I did systemize elements of the business, and I was getting leads for a period of time from people through my renovation business. But then after a while, I closed it up and started life here.
Yeah. So your latest venture is all about leadership, which is again something entirely different. So you got an additional education. I almost don't dare saying it, because then listeners may just shut off. Yeah, like, this is a railway podcast, and now we're talking about life coaching. So what did you how did you get into life coaching and making a formal qualifications there, and what developed from that?
And when I moved across to Melbourne, and my husband got a role with WSP and started working on level crossing removals, CT, and then I applied for a job with Metro Trains and was successful. But I started off as an engineering coordinator. I had a lot more experience than that, but perhaps looking at my resume, they didn't actually think that I had years and years of experience. I had a bit of a break with all the different businesses that I did, that I didn't actually get a really senior role within the business. And to be honest, I could have done it with my eyes closed, and I was bored. So I did my role and I did it to the best of my ability, but I had time. And so my husband said to me, just enjoy life, put your feet up, enjoy the kids, and don't worry about it. But I was so itchy in the sense that I just needed to do something more. And that's when I took on my master's in life coaching to just learn new skills to become a better mom, a better person overall. And when I got exposed to that course, I told myself, Teeshal, all you're going to do is just learn and just do nothing. But I couldn't help myself. I think 4 months into the course, I went, there is a problem within the industry that needs fixing, and I think I can do something about it. And that is how I started up Grit Leadership. It's a certified social enterprise that helps with gender equity and creating a more inclusive workplace within the industry. That is the aim. And we do that through leadership programs where we help leaders walk a mile in someone else's shoe, and we leverage gamification and virtual reality to help leaders go from heart to head. And all of our surplus funds go back towards building programs for young girls in schools.
Okay, wait a second here. You were just talking about virtual reality and gamification related to leadership development. I mean, this is, if somebody has told me this before, I would have said, well, this is the most odd one out thing that I've ever heard. But I take you seriously. I said, Mo, you've got to be on something. If somebody has an entrepreneurship record like you, then this is something that you have thought about. This is something that you consider worthwhile, valuable, and something that's viable, that works. Tell me how. Tell the listeners how. How do you get VR and gamification into leadership development?
Well, I think in one word, it's to create an immersive experience. I mean, how many of us sometimes attend training programs and just to be bored to death by PowerPoint, right? Or being given manuals of things to read, which no one actually really opens those folders after they actually finish a training course. So the whole idea of our training programs is to create that immersive experience. And like I said, is for people, and because leadership is about mindset, right? And people say, how do you can't train a dog to do new tricks. Like you can't change people. That's just how they think. That's just how they are. But my belief is that if something within their heart, the strings that their heart gets to get tugged, it will change in the way they actually think. It'll change the way they act, which means we'll actually have a change in behaviors, change in outcomes. It's really as simple as that. So leveraging technology, I'll explain a little bit about how the VR actually works. So our leaders effectively put the VR headsets on. When they put the headset on, they actually get an immersive experience. So they get to be somebody else. And so for example, if I go into the VR experience, instead of being a brown woman of color, I would actually be maybe a white Caucasian in my 60s, someone completely different. And then I walk into a scenario and listen to conversations that are actually transpiring. And it might be a situation where there is actually an element of discrimination. So then I have a choice as to how I choose to respond when I'm in that conversation. And the VR experience allows me to choose the options of how I choose to respond. And based on that, the scenario and the scene changes based on what I've picked. Now, the whole idea of the immersive experience is for you to feel what it's like to be somebody else. VR doesn't solve the problem, but VR helps you have that immersive experience so that we can dig deeper and have a more open conversation around what transpired.
Yeah, I see the immersive effect there, or the immersive component, and VR is certainly very useful for that. How do you program these scenarios? It's virtual, right? So even if you come up with the say, the scripts for role plays or something like that, you still need someone to turn this into a VR experience, basically to turn it into a computer software. And then also have enough scenarios that, depending on the reaction, as you said, depending on what people say in that situation, you have different outcomes, different reactions. Who's doing that for you?
Yeah, good question. This is going to take a completely different tangent right now into our conversation, because I'm one person. I only have one brain, as in my mind, and I can't think of all the different outcomes. So I think the power is actually in collaboration. Through LinkedIn, which is an amazing platform during COVID days when most people couldn't network, I leveraged this platform to create a lot of connections that was probably outside my norm. So I wasn't really connecting with fellow engineers. There was a project I came across called the Human Library. Have you heard of that before?
No, I haven't.
No.
Sorry.
So the idea is, instead of actually borrowing a book for 15 minutes, borrow a person for 15 minutes and tap into their experience as a form of knowledge. And I thought that the idea was really fascinating. So in a 2-year period, I had random conversations with strangers on LinkedIn. I think it was 250 plus conversations over 2 years. Wow. And what it resulted with was connections with people that I'm extremely grateful for. So Christine and Shondell, who run the training programs for Grid Leadership today, came from a platform like LinkedIn, which I probably never would have met. And it's just through collaboration and working with them that we actually came through different scenarios and how to deliver this program effectively.
Yeah. I want to change gear here and basically take the interview more back into railways. If some of the listeners are still there, still hoping that we get back to talking about railways, now is the time. Now we're doing this. The headline of your profile says something about building diverse and inclusive, high-performing teams. And when I read this, my reaction was that a lot of people will say there's a contradiction in this. So either you pick your team members for performance, or you pick your team members for diversity and inclusion. You can't have both at the same time, or it's a bit of a split to have both at the same time. So tell me more about, and let's just refocus on the railway industry and at your current position, where I think you're probably applying some of those things. If you were to form a new team, you start first with the diversity and inclusion and then see that you bring the performance in, or how do you approach this, that it isn't a contradiction, but it actually fits together?
Yeah. Oh my God, I love this topic, Doctor. Thank you for asking that. I think it's really hard for an inclusive team and self-performance to not coexist. So I believe for a team to be high performing, it needs to be inclusive. To give you an example, like we think of level crossing removal projects in Victoria, which is happening rapidly, and oftentimes with this level crossing projects, it's an alliance model. So you have a designer, you have a constructor, you have the rail operator, and you almost have high performing individuals from different organizations that have been brought together under one structure within 6 months, 8 months, 10 months to deliver a project, right? Mm-hmm. One would think that if you actually just bring together all the high performers, somehow it will be a high performing team that would actually deliver great results. But nothing could be further from the truth.
Yes.
Right? And part of the reason for that is that if you don't have a team that's inclusive, it doesn't really matter how high performing an individual may be, because ultimately you need the team to be high performing, not necessarily an individual. So diversity plays a major part here, because diversity is not just in form of gender or age or sexual orientation or cultural background. There are so many elements that actually constitutes diversity. The fact that people even work for different organizations is diverse because the culture that they come from is a bit different. The way of thinking, their drivers are different. But how do you create that high performing sort of state of play within the team comes from a place where you're actually building trust, building a level playing field for everyone to feel like they actually belong and they can actually deliver their best work. So I think the key is it comes back to, yes, it could be railways, it could be buildings, it could be entrepreneurship and running businesses. Ultimately, we are in the people business. Right? Because even if we deal with signaling engineers and overhead engineers and very highly technical people in their fields, and good on them, because if we didn't have them, there'll be a lot of elements that we won't be able to deliver, but they still need to communicate and they still need to be part of a team in order to deliver a project. And I think oftentimes the challenge is when highly technical SMEs sort of work by themselves without collaborating with others. They can also provide great input within the team to actually create a good sort of outcome.
Okay, so that starts to make sense. So let's just stick with the alliance model for a moment. So you bring high performing team members in from different organizations. So that's your high performance ticked off, at least as a baseline, as say the potential for a high performing team. So because if you have high performing individuals, chances are that you have you can get it to a high performing team. You have the diversity almost by default, as you said, by people coming from different organizations that may have competed against each other in the past. So some people may really have to get over themselves to work together with people from certain other organizations. And then you may have additional diversity aspects where like age, gender, ethnic background, and all this kind of stuff. Okay, so now the key or the missing piece seems to be that inclusion bit. So for all these diverse people that all have the potential for high performance, how to bring them together and to make them work inclusively as a team. How do you do that?
I think it's just one word. It's creating a sense of belonging. So it's creating a psychologically safe space. And I know this word gets bandied around a lot. And we hear a lot about it, but it's really coming back to just the simplicity of just connecting with one another. No one wants to be in an environment where they want to give their best if they don't feel valued by other members of the team. If you have high performers that are high performing individuals coming into a team, they all want to prove a point because they're all high performing and they all feel that they can actually do things, right? Yeah. But how do you get the best out of people without making sure that every single member of the team values others' input? And the only way I feel, and this is just based on personal experience, is actually by building that connection within the team members. When you see someone more than their title, more than their SME experience, and you can see that they're actually human beings, you take it to a whole new level. I know it just sounds so simple, but oftentimes the biggest challenges that I actually face, even in my current role, dealing with very complex stakeholders or difficult situations, is not the technical aspect of it. It's the human aspect of it, where we're just trying to get along as human beings before you actually bring in the complexity.
I've got a bit of I wanted to leave this to the end, and we're coming towards the end anyway, which is very disappointing because I could keep talking to you forever. But when I did the study of your LinkedIn profile, I had a look almost accidentally at the top voices, which means famous people in the industry that you are listening to, that you are following, and so on. That was a list of 11 people, not all women. So I expected to see a lot of women, which I did, but it was about 50-50, more or less. There was one person in these 11, which I absolutely would not have expected there. And you did mention the name already earlier in the interview. for someone who is so much into diversity and inclusion like you, how does Jack Welch fit into this?
Oh, Jack Welch. Yeah, really interesting. I actually read his book called Winning.
Yes.
And I think I see where you're actually coming from now in terms of controversy. But Jack Welch, following his book and following his career within GE, he was a very good student of the business to start with. But he got to a point whereby he challenged the status quo as to how businesses needed to be run. He continually brought fresh perspective, and he was all about creating high-performing teams. And how did he do that? By connecting with one another. And he was very customer eccentric. He was very much focused on who the client was and what they actually needed and expected out of businesses. So he was, and maybe some of his styles, of axing certain teams and cutting cost and whatnot would not probably be something that people sort of resonate with necessarily. But I actually like the aspect whereby he had a huge focus on the client. And when he did that by making sure that because the focus was on the client, then you look within as to how you needed to change your way of operating so that your customer actually wins.
A very, very nice answer. And I was kind of hoping for you would say something like that. I thought the people who see Jack Welch as controversial just see the one side of him, and he had a reputation as being extremely ruthless in cutting back businesses. Like, if you're not number one or number two in the market, you have no reason to exist. Yeah, so we need to cut you back. So a lot of people see this ruthless aspect of Jack's management style, and they basically project this on the entire human being. Like, somebody with a mindset like this, he cannot have anything positive to offer, and they put him into one drawer. What you basically just said with your response is, yes, there were those aspects and you didn't like them particularly well, but on the other hand, there were a lot of things that you could actually learn from him that were actually positive, that even fitted into your set of values about a high performance culture of diverse individuals. So I think that the takeaway here, which came out beautifully from your answer, is really to look at each and every person. What do they have to offer? Where are the strengths? Where are the positive aspects of it? Even though you would never marry them because of some characteristics which are maybe not so perfect. Yeah. And I mean, marry them was basically, I don't know, becoming his greatest fans or something like that. So I didn't mean marrying literally, but you know what I mean. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And it's actually very much aligned with the way that I'm looking at people myself. Like, everybody who is kind of famous and standing out in the industry anywhere, any of the industry leaders will always have critics, and they always will have people which attack certain aspects of the personality and say, this person is fake, or this person is this, or this person is conservative, and this person is I don't know, a racist or what have you, and then very often people are put into these drawers and put aside, and I don't want to know about him. Yeah. So, but looking at various aspects of a personality, I think it's one of the tricks to create this inclusive environment. Like saying, okay, well, for this kind of work here, the strengths of this person over there are actually very helpful. Yeah. And then maybe some of the other things are, well, I just don't talk to him about politics. Yeah, so we leave this aside. It's a work environment here, so I can basically brush over that this person is having a different political agenda, or a different this, different that, whatever. Yeah?
It's really interesting, right, Doc? When they talk about marriage as a whole, where women get married to men, hoping that they could change them. And then men marry their women expecting that they'll never change. Right? And it's really interesting when you use that sort of way of thinking. It's the same with the people that we actually deal with, whether it's business, work, whatever it might be. I think if we go with the approach of expecting people to change, why? You got to kind of accept them for the way they are, but then you just take the bits, like you say, take the bits that actually works for you. And I think that's the unique part of working with people that are different. And the truth is, I think people that are making waves, whatever way, shape, or form that they're doing it, some people are going to love them, some people are going to hate them, but the truth is, everyone's still watching them.
Mm. Mm. Okay. Wrapping up one more thing from the long list that I had coming towards the end. I've seen you've written an article, and it was in the early stages of the COVID pandemic in like April 2020, something like that. How to win your people during the current pandemic. And a couple of quotes there. Recession is a perfect time to invest in training. And then another one, training is an essential investment, not an expense. So maybe a couple of remarks on that, because what I find is whenever budgets get tighter, training is normally one of the very first things where costs are cut, where it's cut back to let's save some money over there. And especially in Melbourne, where you are from, we are seeing this at the moment, where the last state budget was quite constrained related to transport projects. A couple of projects that were seen as a given have suddenly been stopped. For example, the airport rail project and also Geelong Fast Rail. So money seems to be scarcer everywhere across transport in Victoria than what it used to be. And this is just one example. So this is not against Victoria or anything. You see the same thing happening everywhere where the budget gets a bit tighter. And what I can also already see happening, and especially in Victoria over those last couple of months since that new budget came out, or before then even, when there was an expectation that the next budget would have some constraints and some cutbacks and so on, that the willingness to invest in training is going down, significantly going down. What do you see can be done to change this mindset back, to really get it back into the mindset of the leaders, of the managers, the executives in the industry, that training is an aspect that should be the very last one to cut back on?
Yeah, it's really interesting when you look at a lot of organizations and you ask them, what is your number one asset? Your number one asset is not the system, it's not the technology, it's not the product, but they say it's their people. They will always say, my number one asset is my people. But yet, they're the number one thing that's compromised on when things actually go a little bit south.
Yep.
Right? So I find that in itself interesting. So, yes, obviously, when your belt's getting a little bit tightened, there isn't enough money to go around, fair enough, you need to reevaluate. But how do you reevaluate that without working out who best to make those decisions within an organization? Is it an executive team? I mean, if an executive team knows exactly what their people actually do, that's fine. But oftentimes it's the foot soldiers that probably know what needs to be done to cut costs. And if you invest in people, which is your number one asset, they will actually help you ride that wave. And I think that mindset is probably what's really challenging for a lot of people, because they just think, it's a non-essential thing. You only do that when you've got extra. But I think that's such flawed thinking, because how else do you grow your people? How do you keep your people? How do you retain them so that they don't jump ship to the next best competitor because they actually feel that things are a little bit shaky? So you can't say you value your people, but then at the same time, you don't actually invest in them.
Yeah. It reminds me of something that was said by another top voice in your list, and that's Gary Vaynerchuk. So he was quite famous for a while, and he's still doing that, to basically say a leader needs to work for their employees, and they need to emphasize with their employees. They need to actively seek to find out what makes the employees tick. And it may be a different thing for anyone. I mean, if you have kids at school, for example, it may be most important for you that you can be home at 3 o'clock in the afternoon to pick your kids up from school. For somebody else, it may be most important to go on a training course once in a while, because then they feel valued, they feel the company invests into them, and basically finding out what the preferences are of the employees, which is not one size fits all, which will be different for anybody, is maybe a key for like improving the satisfaction of the employees and getting through rougher patches like recessions, pandemics, what have you, and be in a good position when times get better again, and retain the employees. Yeah.
You'd be surprised, like, what good ideas some of your employees might even come up with to actually overcome or get ahead of the reception. It's really interesting you speak about Gary Vee. One of his right hand person, really, he always looks at it as their people person, right? Whether it's director of people. And I find sometimes that can be a little bit tokenistic in a lot of organizations to actually have a director of people or chief of people, but the emphasis is always often on delivery and not necessarily on projects people, as opposed to the people. Sometimes I really feel it's a case of saying something and doing something else.
Yeah, I think he employed a person once, and he gave her, it was a woman, by the way, and he gave her the job title of Chief Heart Officer. I'm not sure whether that's the one that you meant, but it was for him, it was the ideal way of bringing out this emphasis part of the job, like really.
Yeah.
Considering the hearts, which means like the values and what's really important, what's close to the hearts of the employees. Yeah, so I found this quite amazing. I'm afraid our time is up. It's not just up; it's already overrun. Thank you so much for being there and for answering all those questions, which were pretty much all over the place. And I found it extremely valuable, extremely interesting. And I hope that people can say, as I did, that even the parts of the discussion that we had that were seemingly completely outside the railway industry still have important lessons there that can be reapplied into the railway industry. Like things you're doing outside work, which seem to be unrelated to your daytime job, can still give you skills and experiences that can reflect back into the work part of your life and make you a better contributor, if you will.
Well, I think it's Albert Einstein that actually said that you cannot solve a problem with the same mindset that was used to create it. And oftentimes we try and solve problems knowing what we think we know. But I think when you take yourself outside of your day-to-day to do something else, you'll be quite surprised at the creative juices that actually come from doing something quite different to come up with something creative.
Yes. And this is a perfect way to end this, especially because you just mentioned mindset. So one request for all of you listeners, after the end of this interview, which will be in just a moment, please stay on it for a moment for the common advertisement of my new training, which is all about mindset. So just have a listen to it and see whether that's something that talks to you. Thank you very much, Teeshal, again for your time, and for all the listeners, apart from the request to listen to the coming couple of minutes after this interview. Also, if you like the podcast, check out the other episodes. I have quite a list of other women in the industry, which I think are probably similar interesting as Teeshal today was. So you can look forward to a number of very interesting guests that you may never heard about, but you will find very, very interesting as well. And tell your friends about it if you like this episode. Subscribe to the podcast. That will help a lot. And thanks again, Teeshal. Until next time, everybody, Keep it simple and bye for now.
Yeah. Thank you, Doc.
Hi, this is Doc Frank from the studio. I want to inform you about my latest and greatest training development, and it is all about the mindset of a high capacity railway organization. What I found in my experience of training and consulting is that often you have projects for new technology which seem to be perfectly planned, which are very well executed, and they still don't lead to the success that was expected. And very often the reason for that is mindset. Key stakeholders that have what I call a legacy mindset, an outdated old ways of thinking where the new technology is treated in the same way as the old one, but it's just not suitable to get the most out of the new technology. What I'm offering in this training course, which is called High Capacity Railway Mindset, is that every month there's a new training module with 5 examples of an outdated legacy mindset, the suggestion of a new mindset more suitable for a high capacity railway, and how to get from the old to the new mindset. So those modules will be repeated every month for an entire year. So in total, we are talking about 60 different examples how to get from an old mindset to a more suitable new mindset. And the cost for this is only $10 per example. So this can be paid monthly, this can be paid for a year. And there is an early bird special where until the end of July, you're only paying for 10 months instead of 12. So you get 12, you only pay for 10. And then you have the usual service of an alumni community afterwards where you can ask ongoing questions for at least 12 months after the training. You find more information and you can sign up on my training portal docfranktraining.podia.com/mindset. I hope I see you at this training. It's really leading edge stuff. Nobody else in the world is training on this. And if you really want to explore the ultimate frontier of success in technology projects, then this is the training you need to take. Hey, Doc Frank here, host of the Railway Conversations podcast. Thank you for listening.